was a remix from a song from that Muppet Christmas Carol. Obviously, that's still one of my favorite Christmas movies, the Muppet Christmas Carol. So yesterday I was sitting at Starbucks on Tittabawassee, drinking a peppermint mocha, looking across the street at some giant Christmas ornaments in the lawn of the store across the street, and working on a new Christmas message series for his house, and it's still a week and a half before Thanksgiving. So, and then this morning we woke up with snow on the ground, and I thought it was pretty appropriate for what we're talking about tonight. And so it raises some questions of when is it okay to start talking about Christmassy things?
December.
Got some thoughts on that. So, think about this. Ask yourself this. Will I grinchily grumble about anything Christmassy before Black Friday? Will I Scroogely scoff at all of Christmas because of all the materialism and commercialism that's around it? So, with those ideas, I'd like us to look at some key words. Put these up on the screen. Bah is the part of speech is an exclamation. It's an expression of contempt or disagreement. Then humbug is a noun. It's deceptive or false talk or behavior. If that describes a person, they would be a hypocrite. So when someone says bah humbug, they're expressing contempt, and especially in the context of Christmas, they're expressing contempt, and that they believe Christmas is a fake or a fraud. And I'm sure many people have used those words half jokingly, not realizing the actual weight of the words they're using. Here's some more words. Scrooge is a miserly curmudgeon. Go back to that. Scrooge is a miserly... Okay. There we go. A miserly curmudgeon. How many people have ever used the word curmudgeon? Has anyone ever read the word curmudgeon before today? We've got a couple. All right, so if I were making a dictionary, I would not use the word curmudgeon in the definition of another word. So we gotta find out what that means. Curmudgeon is, next slide, a bad-tempered person, especially an old one. So, like in the movie Up, Carl, after his wife had died, was a curmudgeon. And then the word Grinch is a person who's mean-spirited and unfriendly. Of course, the words Scrooge and Grinch come from characters from Christmas novels. And but do these definitions mean that we have to go out of our way to dissociate ourselves from those characters? I would say not. Got on a Grinch tie tonight. So what makes these characters redeemable is because both their stories are stories of redemption. The Christmas Carol and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, they're really stories of redemption. And we all have stories of redemption, or we could have stories of redemption, either on the Jesus saved my soul level, or on the just I'm taking a next step and adjusting my course. That could be, each step could be a story of redemption. So I don't mind wearing a Grinch tie. I don't wear it because I am a Grinch, but if we think about the story, it reminds me that Noah's heart was 2 sizes too small at the beginning of the story. By the end of the story, the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. So, it's a story of redemption. Of course, Scrooge and Grinch are just fictional characters. But here's the point with this. We want those words to describe us, especially our response to Christmas, or really anything God or church related. Here's a different kind of word, Advent. It's the arrival of a notable person, thing, or event. If we use it as a proper noun, Advent is the first season of the Christian church year leading up to Christmas and including up to the 4 preceding Sundays. And I would take a little note with that definition. It is a tradition held by, practiced in particular by traditional churches. Advent's not actually in the Bible, so it's not something that we have to do. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So if you celebrate, that's good. If you don't celebrate, that's fine too. But also in Christian theology, go back a step. In Christian theology, Advent refers to the coming or the second coming of Christ. So, will I approach Christmas time this year dragging my feet, or will I embark on an adventure of joy as we move forward toward the celebration of Christ's birth? So tonight our new series is called Adventure. We're choosing, building, anticipating joy through the Christmas season. I want to tell you a little bit about this past Sunday afternoon. It was the best, worst experience of my life. Heather and I and about 20 other His House alumni, including Chad and Hannah, went to visit our friend Dan Tubbs. And here's a photo of him. This was on my last visit to the Grand Canyon. This spring break it will have been 6 years. And Dan is now 25 years old. He's been married 3.5 years. And he was just put on hospice at his parents' house with a very short prognosis. Dan was one of those people in his house who always had a guitar. He loves to worship. Very gifted with the guitar, very gifted with vocal harmonies. So the group of 20 of us go over to his parents' house where he's at and decide to have an afternoon of worship with Daniel. And close to half of us had been part of the His House worship team at some point over the years. And Caleb, some of you might know him from 242, he usually plays electric guitar. He brought his guitar and led us in worship. So we sang a bunch of Daniel favorites. After singing the first 3 or 4 songs, Dan decides to say something. Sitting in a wheelchair, whenever he tries to talk, it's not very loud. He has to cough after every several words because cancer in his lungs and among other places. And this is what he says. Worshiping with you guys reminds me of a lot of things, but mostly it gives me a glimpse of how awesome heaven's going to be. So everybody's been kind of sniffling a little bit this whole time, but then the floodgates open and everybody starts sobbing after he says that, and his parents start handing around tissue boxes, and it's one big snotty, slobbery mess. And then we continue to worship several more songs. But Dan had every right in our eyes to be very angry, pessimistic, negative, doubting, complaining about his situation. But he passed along joy and hope and faith because he knows that he's going to be with Jesus. He's anticipating it. It's his Advent, his adventure that he's looking forward to. So as transition back, as we're approaching this time of year, we celebrate the coming of Jesus, and even as we look forward to his return, I've got one main idea as a takeaway for tonight. Be a joy giver, not a joy stealer this season. Be a joy giver, not a joy stealer this season. 1 Corinthians 15:45 says, so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The last Adam was a reference to Jesus. There's like the first Adam, and then Jesus was like the second or the last Adam. In Romans chapter 5, tells us that the first man brought death to the whole human race. He was a taker. Adam was a taker. But Jesus brought life. He brought peace. His arrival made it possible to have good news of great joy for all people. So Jesus was a giver. As we approach this time of year when we celebrate his coming, be a joy giver, not a joy taker this season. Just being aware of that idea could be helpful to us, but we're going to look at a few specifics. How can we apply this? Here's 3 alternatives to ways we steal joy. 3 alternatives to ways we steal joy. First one is use words that build up rather than negative talk. Use words that build up rather than negative talk. Ephesians 4:29 says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that may benefit those who listen. Some of us might know we have a problem with negative talk, and others of us don't picture ourselves as negative people. But if we consider some examples of unwholesome and negative talk, we might change our minds. Words of hatred, that's not too difficult to avoid. What about words of judgment, cussing, cynicism, slander, gossip, discouragement, negative criticism, name-calling, blame, griping, complaining, insults? Or even just saying, no, you cannot listen to Christmas music until it's the day after Thanksgiving. And whether things like that we say in all seriousness or whether we say them half jokingly, they can still steal people's joy or have that temptation to steal people's joy. Those negative words don't benefit anyone, including ourselves. So the solution isn't just to censor our words, but to change our thinking. The solution isn't just to censor our words, but change our thinking. So this afternoon, I'm writing this, finishing it up, and I had to go pick up Tobin from school. So as I'm driving there, I'm going down Shattuck. There's a small yellow school bus coming the other direction, and the bus driver, there's different things that they're allowed to do depending on the situation. The bus driver slows down and pulls over and puts on his hazard lights. Hazard lights as in all the turn signals blinking at the same time. So the big red lights on top were not blinking. The red stop sign that opens up from the side of the bus didn't swing out, and yet all 4 lanes of traffic stopped for the hazard lights on this bus. And hazard lights for any vehicle, including a bus, mean proceed with caution. And I discovered I had words for the driver in front of me and all the other drivers. They weren't cuss words, but they were definitely negative words. And then immediately, like conviction, I'm writing about this at this very moment. So, none of the other drivers heard me, so I wasn't stealing their joy. But it's that attitude, the thought process that leads to the words, that I need to work on, that probably all of us need to work on. When we just censor the words, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm. It's not going to fix the problem. So whatever area we need to work on changing negative words, we have to start with the thought process behind those words. The Apostle Paul wrote Ephesians, which we read just a little bit, a verse from that. He made a pretty big deal about using our words to build others up. He talks about it again in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 8, and chapter 13, verse 10. Paul tells the people of Corinth that Jesus gave him authority for building them up, but not for tearing them down. I think that's just an awesome thought. Jesus gives us authority to build people up. We have the right. We have the authority from God to build people up. We do not have the right. We do not have the authority to tear people down with our words. Maybe that's in part because negativity is so much more contagious than words that build up. Negativity is so much more contagious than words that build up. And there's not really any good explanation for that other than spiritual warfare is real. But Jesus gives us authority to encourage, to take responsibility, to cheer, to compliment, to forgive, to express love and care, to pray with people. All right, a second alternative to ways we steal joy. Number 2, express interest in others rather than selfish talk. Express interest in others rather than selfish talk. How many times do we have the opportunity to express something real about ourselves that we're feeling, whether joyful or maybe sorrowful? We introduce the basic idea of it, we're ready to elaborate on it, and then the person listening turns it into something about themselves. And often it's not even relatable on the same scale as what we were talking about. For example, you ask someone, hey, what's new with you? And they respond, oh, hey, I'm pretty excited about this. I just learned to ski. And then you kind of interrupt them and say, oh, yeah, I went skiing once and I fell and twisted my knee. It was a horrible experience. Or maybe at the other end you say, oh, yeah, I used to ski all the time. I was on the ski team in high school and won all these competitions. A pretty big deal when it comes to skiing. You know, some people, we start to have the opportunity to share something real, and, there's brightness in your eyes, and then they just, make it about themselves. That's an exaggeration, kind of, what I just said. It's not to say we don't get to share about our experiences when in conversation. We should. There should be back and forth there. But if I interrupt them, to make it about me, if I don't even acknowledge what they said or give them opportunity to elaborate, I just made an attempt to steal their joy. It's like, hey, let's bring up their joy and then squash it and quench it immediately when we do that. Or if someone says, oh, I'm so excited, Catherine, just put up Christmas lights. And nope, not allowed. We don't talk about that sort of thing before Thanksgiving. It's not allowed. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. One of the best ways we can demonstrate this and even develop it, if our hearts, if we haven't been interested in others, we can develop that, is to affirm people and ask them questions. We can show interest by affirming people and asking questions. Like when someone shares something, acknowledge it. Say, that's cool or that's horrible or whatever they're sharing about, and ask them questions to go deeper with it. But immediately making it about ourselves makes it a joy stealer. So our third alternative to ways we steal joy is this. Fill your mind with God things rather than negative self-talk. Fill your mind with God things rather than negative self-talk. My guess is that most of us would be the guiltiest of this one. When we fail at something or drop the ball, we're tempted to beat ourselves up about it. We listen to the enemy's negative suggestions, or we just run with our own negative thoughts. If we have a bad day emotionally, we might let that drive all the other areas of our life because we tend to dwell on those negative thoughts and rehearse them over and over in our minds. But don't steal your own joy. Don't steal your own joy. If we're mentally struggling in a particular area, it doesn't help to not think about that anymore. It's kind of impossible to not think about something. Instead, we have to think about something else. We have to switch channels in our mind. Think about something different. Paul gives us some examples here of what to fill our minds with. Philippians 4, verses 4 through 8. This is there's three pieces of this that we hear quite often, but we don't usually hear the whole thing together. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Back to Sunday afternoon with Dan. When he was getting kind of tired with the big group there and singing, he asked to pray for us to end the worship time, to wrap that up. And he prayed for about 7 minutes. And it was quiet and slow and deliberate. He kind of struggled through it physically and emotionally with his own tears and coughs and our tears. I'll tell you some of the things he prayed. He prayed that he'd been noticing in the last few weeks that out of some of the saddest things come some of the most beautiful things. He prayed that we, everyone else who was in the room, would not question God's will, but trust his plans. He's dying of cancer, has maybe a couple weeks. Ask us not to question God's will, and instead trust in his plans. He prayed that we would boldly do the work God sets for us, that the love and support shown at that worship session would grow into launching points for our various communities. He prayed, acknowledging that we don't deserve anything good, but by the goodness of who God is, he made a way, gave us a hope and a future. Dan prayed to express that he was so thankful for that. Like I said, it was the best, worst experience of my life. Incredibly sad and beautiful and joyful all at the same time. That wouldn't have been possible if Dan had not been joyful about seeing Jesus soon. Had he let his emotions drive him, there would have been so many excuses for joy stealers, and no one would have blamed him for any of those. but he filled his mind with God things: joy, thankfulness, beauty, love, hope, faith. So even though we're a little bit early for the Christmas season, let's carry this into Christmas time and beyond. So to review, our takeaway is be a joy giver, not a joy stealer this season. And we can do that by using words that build, by expressing and developing interest in others, and filling our minds with God things. Don't steal anyone's joy, including your own. This will help us approach this Christmas season with the adventure of looking forward to his arrival. Let me pray.